Hi guys, with ICT IGCSE lesson. Today we are going to start with our materials, the IGCSE Cambridge, with the second edition for the author Graham Brown, Brain and David Watson. So let's view our material content. As we see here, we have two parts, the theoretic parts and the practical parts. I will start with you, I hope, with the theoretic parts. The first semester of 2020 will including the first three parts: the type and components of computer systems, input and output devices, storage devices, and media. And in the second semester of 2020-21 will include the networks and the ethics of using them and the ethics of using IT. So we will have this year the first 5 chapters of these materials, and on the 10th grade you are going to complete the rest of these chapters. Let's start our lessons today, guys. So let's go. Okay guys, so the first lesson will be talking about section 1, types and components of computer systems. Guys, let me tell you that the computer system contains two main parts: the hardware and the software. The hardware represents the physical parts or the physical sides. It's something that can be touched. The software is something cannot be touched. It's like an application, it's like a program, it's like a code. It's software. So you can imagine this thing. It's like our body is the hardware, and our soul inside our body is the software. So this is the computer system: the hardware, the physical parts, and the software. So all the computer systems contain these two main parts: the hardware and the software. So the physical and the, as we say, this is the physical and this is the logical, or this is something that cannot be touched, as you see. Okay guys, let's start, guys, with the hardware, the physical part. The physical part containing two main sides or two main parts. Either it's an internal hardware devices or external hardware device. As you see here, this is the internal hardware devices, and this is the external hardware devices. We are talking now, guys, about the hardware. So the hardware is split for two main things: the internal. What do you mean by internal? The internal hardware devices, all the parts, including the computer case. Okay, it is related directly to the motherboard. What is the motherboard? We are going to say that this is the motherboard. Okay, so all the internal hardware devices are inside the computer case, related directly to the motherboard. Let's see the first one of the internal hardware. It is the motherboard, the main printed circuits board found in computer, and contains electrical components such as central processing, hardware devices such as keyboard. We have all these connected directly to the motherboard, So the motherboard is the main board that found in the computer case. It's connected all the computer or all the internal hardware, So the motherboard is a printed circuits board found in all computers. It allows the processor and other computer hardware to function and communicate with each other. So this is the motherboard. The second one is random access memory, the RAM. As you see here, this is the RAM. Guys, this is the RAM. What is the RAM? Random access memory. What do you mean by random access memory? What is the random access memory, guys? The random access memory is an internal chip. It's like that. It's an internal chip where data is temporarily stored when running application. This memory can be written to and read from, since its contents are lost when the power to the computer is turned off. So this type of memory, it cannot be saved the data for a long time. It will lose all the data when you just shut down the machines. But it is called in another way name memory. It is very fast. It either could be in a different size. It could be 1 mega, 2 mega, 1 giga, 2 giga. It could be DDR2, DDR3, DDR4. It is related to the motherboard version or model. Okay, guys? So this is the RAM. This is the RAM. The third one is ROM. ROM, read-only memory. What is the ROM? The ROM, guys, is a memory used to store information that needs to be permanent. It is often used to send, for example, configuration data for a computer system. These chips cannot be altered and can only be read from. One of the main advantages, and that information stored on the ROM chip is not lost even when the power is turned off to the computer. They are often referred to as non-volatile memories. Non-volatile memories. So the ROM, it has a configuration, it has an information that printed through the manufacturer of this computer. This is the ROM. And also we have the sound card. We have the sound card. What is the sound card? It's like here, if you just go. This is the sound card, guys. What is the sound card? Okay. So, the sound card is an integrated circuit board that provides a computer with the ability to produce sound. This sound can be heard by user either through speakers or headphone. Sound cards also allow a user to record sound input from a microphone connected to the computer and to manipulate sound stored on a disk sound card. Use two basic methods to translate digital data into analog signals needed for speakers. So guys, this is the sound card. Let's see in the slide. This is the sound card. Okay guys? Let's get back again to the second one. Okay guys, let's go directly to the second part of the hardware, the external hardware devices. What's the external hardware device? The external hardware devices, it's like monitors, screens, keyboard and mouse, external storage devices like a memory stick and etc. Printers, scanners, speakers and microphone, all these type are external hardware devices. So let's summarize till we just get here. We are talking about the computer system. Computer system is containing hardware and software. The hardware is the physical, the software is just a program or application, something cannot be touched. The hardware is split for two things. First one is internal hardware. It is inside the computer case, connected directly to the motherboard. And the second one that we are talking about now, the external hardware, it's like a mouse. It's external, it's outside the computer case. It's like a mouse, it's like a keyboard, it's like a scanner, printers, monitors, and etc. Okay guys, this is a type of input and output devices. As you see here, it's like keyboard, joystick, optical pen, scanner, barcode reader, webcam, modem, fax, CD, DVD, digital camera, laser printer, microphone, and all these different types of storage. All these guys are input and output devices. Input and output devices. And all these types are external hardware. It is all hardware, but it is not internal, it's external hardware. Just remember that very well. It's external. Everything that should be connected directly to the motherboard and inside the case, it's internal. Anything just like that outside the computer case is an external hardware. Okay, guys? Just remember that very well. Okay. This is our internal hardware devices. This is the RAM, as you see. This is the ROM that printed through the computer manufacturer. This is the sound card. This is the video card. Who guys, for whom that use the computer for gaming, PUBG and so on, they need a video card, a high quality video card to produce high quality pictures or videos. So this is very important to you, I think. The video card, separate video card with an internal capacity of storage. This is the motherboard, guys. This is the part that connected all these parts. Every part that connected directly to the motherboard is an internal hardware. This is the SSD, solid state drive. This type of drive or hard disk used to accelerate the performance of the computer. It is very fast. So most of the computers now, laptops, is using the SSD hard disk to store data, especially the operating system, to accelerate the performance for the computer. And this is the hard disk drive, the regular hard disk drive. What is the hard disk drive? It's the magnetic. It's a magnetic hard disk drive. Why we use the hard disk drive? The hard disk drive, guys, is used to store data. It has a huge, large amount of capacity of storage. It stores all types of data. It doesn't lose any type or any amount of data if you just shut down the PCs. So it's a long life storage device type. Okay, guys, and the most popular one, the hard disk drive. It could be a 500 megabyte, 500 gigabyte, 1 tera, 2 tera. It could be reach 5 tera, I think now. Okay, guys? So it's very huge capacity of storage data. Okay. Let's watch this video, guys. This video will summarize everything we talked about today, about the hardware. Let's watch this video, guys. Okay.
If you work with computers, you've likely heard terms like RAM, hard drive, and processor mentioned by tech support or others who are more interested in what goes on inside of a computer's case. If you've always wondered what the various components of your computer are for, but have never really had the time...
So as we see here, guys, this is the computer case, and all these internal parts are connected directly to the motherboard. This motherboard exists inside this case, like power supply, the main part that's responsible to provide the computers with the power supply, this fan for conditioning all the parts inside, the floppy, the heat sink, the optical drive, the hard disk drive, the RAM, all these internal hardware parts are inside the computer case, as you see here.
To look into it, then this video is just for you. While each one of these components is complex enough to spend a lifetime learning about, I'm going to give a very broad and general overview. A typical desktop computer comes down to these 7 essential parts: case, power supply, motherboard, CPU, RAM, hard drive, and graphics cards. These are the fun...
Notice, guys, that the CPU here is the part that's responsible for performing the arithmetic and logical operations. It is the part that's responsible for performing all the arithmetic and logical operation. And it has, as you see here, many types and many models could be found. Okay, guys?
Fundamental parts of any desktop computer. It may seem daunting at first, so let's separate these into two categories: simple ones and the more complex ones. For starters, let's look at the case. The case is nothing more than a big hunk of plastic that houses everything else. Some of them have more or less physical space, some of them have different parts where you can put screws in or this or that, but at the end of the day, all the case really does is provide a nice enclosed system for everything else. Next up, we have the power supply. This part of your computer, almost always located on the bottom, is the part that plugs into the wall and provides all of the other parts with the electricity needed to do their thing. You can think of it as an extremely advanced AC adapter. The last of the simple parts to mention is the motherboard. The motherboard is a wide and flat circuit board that all of the other components plug into. It's the part that lets all of these components send electrical currents composing data between each other. While not particularly expensive, the motherboard is arguably the most important component because without it, you'd have nowhere to put anything else. So that's it for the simple components. Now let's move on to the more complex parts, the ones that deal with data. The four main components to keep in mind here are CPU, RAM, hard drive, and graphics card.
So the CPU, guys, is the central processing unit, is the part of the computer, as we said, that interprets and executes the commands from the computer hardware and software. It is normally part of the computer motherboard. CPUs used to be made up of discrete components and numerous small integrated circuits. These were combined together on one or more circuits board. However, due to the modern manufacturing techniques, this is a single integrated circuit, which is the heart of the most PCs, and it is also found in many household devices and equipment where some control or monitoring is needed. For example, the engine manufacturing system in car. So most of the modern equipment now, it has an CPU or a processor. So this part is responsible for controlling, monitoring all the jobs of this mechanism or this part. Okay, guys? So this is the main job or the main responsibility for the CPU. The CPU is made up of a control unit which controls the input-output devices and the arithmetic, as we said, and logical unit, the ALU, arithmetic and logical unit, which carries out calculations and makes logical decisions, and the immediate access store RAM. So this is the main job for the CPUs.
Now, first things first, I'm going to establish some terminology. Keep in mind that CPU is also known as the Central Processing Unit, or processor. These terms all refer to the same thing. They are completely interchangeable. RAM stands for
The RAM, as we said, the random access memory, it is an internal chip where data is temporarily sensed. Its content are lost when power to the computer is turned off. It is often referred to as a volatile or temporary memory. This was fully defined in the next, I think we are going to discuss this type of storage details in section 3 that talking about the storage and the type of storage.
Random access memory, and is often referred to as just memory. A hard drive is often referred to as a disk drive or storage. And a graphics card is also known as a GPU or graphics processing unit. For this explanation, I'll be using the terms CPU, RAM, hard drive, and graphics card. So let's start with the CPU. The CPU is where your computer does things. It isn't really capable of storing very much data at all, but it's very good at doing things with data. Quickly reading it, arranging it, doing the type of quick and massive calculations needed to run your programs. This is where most of your programs are essentially run from. It's often referred to as the brain of the computer. I personally don't like this description because really your entire computer is just a brain. It's just the center part of your computer's brain. Basically everything that happens in your computer goes through your CPU at some point. Now let's talk about RAM and hard drive at the same time because they have a very unique relationship, which is probably why people often confuse the two. Your hard drive is where all of your data is stored. When your computer tells you you're running low on space, it's because your hard drive is almost full. All of the data that makes up your videos, pictures, documents, project files, or the 3D worlds and models that make up a game are all stored here. While hard drives can store lots of data, they're relatively bad at accessing that data quickly. Everything is accessed through a tiny little wire here, and because most hard drives are made up of spinning disks, your hard drive isn't going to be able to constantly give your CPU the information it needs to run certain programs. That's where RAM comes in. RAM is another form of storage. It stores the exact same kind of data as your hard drive, but RAM sacrifices storage space for nearly instant accessibility. Unlike your hard drive, which sends all of its data through a tiny little thin wire, your RAM is arranged in these long, thin sticks that insert into your motherboard. Think about a storage unit. If you have a massive warehouse with only a thin doorway, it's going to be difficult to get in, find what you need, and get out if it's kind of spread all over the place. You'll have to go through a tiny door. But if you have a long, wide storage shed that's got a big, massive garage composing an entire side of it, you won't be able to store as much, but things are significantly easier to get to. Typically, if your computer has 1,000 gigabytes of storage space in your hard drive, it's likely got about 16 gigabytes worth of RAM. Here's where you put the stuff you own but you aren't currently using, and this smaller one is where you put the stuff that you are using and need to be able to get in and out of quickly. When you run a program or a project file, your CPU identifies what parts of data are needed for that program to run. It pulls them from your hard drive and then it stores them in your RAM sticks for quick accessibility. This is why when you start a new level of a game, for instance, it has to load. Anytime you see loading, it's loading the data that composes that level from your bulky hard drive into your RAM. From a user's perspective, just follow this rule of thumb. RAM allows you to run intensive programs, while disk space allows you to have more of these programs installed. It also allows you to have more of the data they're referencing, whether it be pictures, videos, or mods. And finally, we get to the graphics card. With all of the calculations going on in your computer to turn a bunch of numbers that basically come down to ones and zeros into a constantly updated three-dimensional world, the final and most important and arguably most difficult step is to display that on your monitor. It's possible for your motherboard to do this alone, but it's not going to look good, and it's certainly not going to be able to do much. Your graphics card is essentially an entire computer in and of itself, dedicated to the sole task of figuring out what pixels need to light up on your screen, in what color, and at what time. If you were playing a game that had a very busy and high-texture world with lots of models and different angles and colors, your CPU is the thing that creates that world. It knows where the stuff is, and it does so with data that's been stored in your RAM, which was loaded out of your hard drive, but it's your graphics card that figures out what it's supposed to look like based on where you're standing in the world. Without getting too off topic here, if you're somebody who likes math, I highly recommend you look up fast inverse square root, which is directly related to how three-dimensional worlds calculate perspectives. So that pretty much sums it up. There are other components worth mentioning, such as cooling systems or internal wireless cards, but really those are extras. So to summarize what I talked about so far, the case stores everything in a physical box. The power supply gives electricity to what needs it. The motherboard is the body that everything plugs into. The CPU does everything. RAM stores data that is needed for quick access. Hard drives store everything that you have installed and the data that goes along with those programs. While the graphics card figures out how it's all supposed to look on your monitor. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope.
Okay guys, so okay my dear student, finally I hope you benefited from our lesson today. Let me remind you guys that you are able to ask any question through contacting me directly, so don't hesitate to ask. Keep yourself and your family safe. Take care and goodbye.